Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Naked Eye podcast. This is Nathan Oxenfeld coming to you today on my birthday, May 20th. And I happen to be wearing one of my new birthday presents, which are these pinhole glasses that I got from today's guest, who is Peter Grunwald, based in New Zealand. And he created these pinhole glasses specifically to work with a particular concept that he works with as well, that generally he refers to as presence, as opposed to being in a state of either overfocusing or underfocusing. We can also find ourselves in this in-between state of presence, which sometimes using these pinhole glasses can bring us into that state, whereas not necessarily all pinhole glasses necessarily will. So I'm really excited to share my interview with Peter today. I was first introduced to Peter Grunwald pretty early on in my natural vision improvement journey. I was actually sharing an office space in Asheville, where I used to live and work, who was an Alexander Technique teacher. And when she found out that I was a Bates Method teacher, she perked up and asked me if I was familiar with Peter Grunwald and his Eyebody approach. And she showed me his book, Eyebody, and it was really interesting to get Peter's take on natural vision improvement coming from also this background of Alexander Technique and these other forms of movement and posture and alignment therapies. And I was immediately intrigued by his Eyebody map, where he essentially has mapped out connections between different parts of the eye and different parts of the body. But not only that, his new book also goes into mapping out different soul qualities, which kind of goes even deeper than just the physical connections, looks at some of the emotional connections and mental aspects as well. So even though the theme of the episode is technically about pinhole glasses, we don't actually get to the pinhole glasses until later in the conversation, because we kind of have to set the scene first to explain some of these preliminary concepts that then will make the pinhole glasses make much more sense. But I'm just happy in general to be putting an episode out about pinhole glasses because they're pretty popular. A lot of people are familiar with them and have maybe even used them themselves. Or maybe you've even looked through a little pinhole that you make with your hand. And check out this pinhole effect. If you take your glasses off and look through a teeny tiny little opening that you make with your index finger curled around in your thumb, then you might actually see quite clearly through that little tiny opening. And this can be actually a pretty critical step for some people to demonstrate to themselves that they actually can see clearly without using prescription glasses. So some people use the pinhole glasses as a nice alternative to prescription glasses to help them function and get through the world and either see things up close or far away without needing to put on prescription glasses. So could be something to incorporate into your natural vision improvement approach. Or maybe you'll get something else out of our conversation today, since we cover other topics beyond just the pinhole glasses. But before we jump right into the interview, I did want to just share a couple of things. First of all, I haven't been as active lately because I'm still in the process of recovering from my injury from this winter when I fell snowboarding and broke my leg. So I'm still on my crutches for another couple weeks before I'm weight bearing and starting physical therapy and everything. So definitely have a lot on my plate to kind of work on my own personal healing process. But I have been getting back to work and been staying busy conducting more interviews. So I actually have some more podcast episodes to be releasing in the next month or two. And actually the one that's coming out after this one, I got to interview Peter's partner, Judy. So we have a whole conversation about the fascia and the connective tissue and her approach to healing as well. So it's going to be really neat to have a little back-to-back episodes with Peter and Judy right after each other. So stay tuned for that. We've been sticking with our normal Better Eyesight podcast schedule of releasing a new episode on the first of each month. So definitely check that out at bettereyesightpodcast.com or on your podcast app. And not only have we been putting our finishing touches on our upcoming Association of Vision Educators conference this fall, but we're also hoping to put together an actual vision retreat, the first vision retreat that I've taught since before the pandemic in upstate New York in the first weekend of October. So it's probably going to be on October 3rd, 4th, 5th, that weekend. And if you have been interested in actually getting involved in this natural vision work in person, this could be a really cool opportunity to come together and gather face to face and actually get involved with the work in a more in-person environment, which can sometimes create some even bigger and faster results for people, especially when you're able to leave your glasses off for an extended period of time, since it's going to be a 3-day retreat. The last time I did one of these, people were able to actually not drive and not have to cook and clean and all, your normal, daily activities. You don't have to really be on screens that much. So it's really an opportunity for you to take the glasses off, leave them off, get support all day and all night for improving your vision. By the end of the weekend, you might have some significant changes that have occurred, not only with your eyesight, but the goal with these retreats is to also go deeper and lead to other types of transformations: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, even. So we're still lining things up for that, but I did just want you to have that on your radar in case you are either in the New England area, because it's going to be in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York, north of New York City. So I'll be adding all these details to my website once it's all solidified and everything like that. But for now, maybe just kind of bookmark that for end of September or beginning of October. It's an amazing time to be in New York or New England in general with all the fall colors. So hopefully it'll be a nice feast for the eyes in that way as well. And by then, I'll be in a much better shape from my injury. I'll be walking again and be really excited to be getting more back into teaching in person instead of just doing it all online. So those are all the announcements for now. I really appreciate you for sticking around and being a subscriber to the Naked Eye podcast. I always love seeing people's comments underneath the videos on YouTube. Really appreciate any feedback or reviews that you can give to the audio podcast in your podcast app. I just love hearing your experience with this and hearing how your vision's changing and improving, and also finding out where you need some extra help or aren't clear about things. But for now, I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Peter Grunwald. Thank you so much for being here, Peter. I would love to welcome you to the Naked Eye podcast. It was really amazing to have you on as a guest on the Better Eyesight podcast. And ever since then, I've been wanting to have you on the Naked Eye podcast to get a chance to learn even more about you and your work and share it with the listeners. So yeah, once again, welcome Peter Grunwald to the Naked Eye podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I remember we met for the first time here in New Zealand, where I live and where I'm located at the moment, a few years ago. How long ago was it?
Yes, that's right. In 2018, at the very end of 2018, I believe. That's when I was down in your neck of the woods in New Zealand, and you were kind enough to have me come visit and get to meet in person. And you're right, that was the first time we met in person. But I was first introduced to you and your work through one of my colleagues, actually almost 10 years ago when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina. I was sharing an office with an Alexander Technique teacher. And so a few days a week, she'd be in the office teaching Alexander Technique. Other days of the week, I'd be in there teaching the Bates Method, the vision lessons. And when she learned about my work, she was like, "Oh, I got to show you this book." And she showed me your book, Eyebody. And that was my first.
Most likely this one.
That's the one. Yep. And that was how she was familiar with vision improvement. And that was how I became familiar with you and your work. And I was just really excited to see how you were kind of combining these approaches. And then also the listeners may recognize your name from one of my previous episodes where I do a little bit of a conference recap and kind of give a little summary of some of the practitioners and professionals who are presenting at the Association of Vision Educators Conference. So I gave a little summary of your presentation there at our virtual conference. So yeah, it's been really neat to see how our paths have crossed over the past decade, and now we're here today. So maybe we could start off, even if people have heard your name before or a little familiar. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit and let us know how you got into some of this awesome work?
Well, hi, I'm Peter here in New Zealand. Yes, so how I got into the work, I'll do a very brief summary. I was very nearsighted, very short-sighted. From the age of 3, I got my first glasses for myopia and for astigmatism, a curvature of the cornea. And apart from this, I was stuttering. Stuttering. Sorry, I was stuttering really, really well. My body posture as I grew older was slumping more and more.
Mm.
Uh, my brain didn't function very well. And emotionally, I had so many fears and anxieties, far more fears and anxieties than what, what the situation really allowed for. And when I was a kid, I had, of course, no idea. My parents, they meant it really well, had no idea that maybe my eyesight, my brain, my posture, and my emotions would be all interrelate together. And that was what I seemed to be in my life needed to figure out for the next 60 odd years.
Hmm.
So then in my late teens, I made the experience. I didn't want to go to in Germany where I grew up, as you can hear it, um, uh, uh, where I didn't want to go to the army. Um, and I was a conscientious objector. And I knew with my stuttering, they would never be acknowledging me because it would have been a trick or something like this. And then my brother, who was a few years older, was saying if his vision would have been worse, he wouldn't have to go to the army. So here I
Ah,
was 17 and a half, and I went to my eye specialist and said, could you check me? I don't want to go to the army. Do you think I need to go? And he checked me and was saying, most likely you need to go because your vision is not poor enough not to go. So here I was doing my first vision training with the intent to make my vision work.
oh
And if
my
you ask
gosh.
me these days, what did you do in order to make your vision work? I I couldn't quite tell you, but I think emotionally I tightened more and more and more. The
Mm.
fear I need to go, I tightened more and more. In these days, I discovered more the brain's coordination, the brain's aspect to the physical eyes. And nowadays I know that I must have been narrowing and tightening fear push the vitreous humor forward, doesn't allow the front part of the eye to be open and free. It narrows more in. This is directly connected with the shoulders. The whole body is slumping more. And when I came then to the part where I needed to be tested at the army, I came directly to the optometrist there. You know those old machines where you put your chin down there, which is
Yeah.
really really good for another 2 diopters more on top. And so I was directly 10 seconds, half a minute later, the optometrist was saying, Peter, Mr. Grunwald, I have to tell you the terrible news. We can't take you because of your poor eyesight. So, what I learned, it was one of my happiest days in my life.
Yeah. Mission
I got what
accomplished.
I wanted, but what I learned from it as an insight, if I can make my vision worse, why not improve it? Yeah, that was why I'm mentioning it, because very often we always think we have to improve our eyes, something like this, but how to make the vision work. So there is a mechanism behind our eyes, um, which affects the physical eyes. A certain behavior within myself affects the function of my physical eyes, and that's what I recommend. If I can make my eyesight worse, why not improving on it? And very often
Yeah.
in life, we always think, well, it needs to get worse and worse and worse.
That's super
So
fascinating. Yeah. And you're not, well, I'd say you're the first person I've met who intentionally wanted to make their vision worse for that purpose, for that specific reason. But you're not the first person I've met who um kind of had that either in the back of their mind or whether it was conscious or unconscious. In other words, like they faked having poor vision in order to get glasses because they thought glasses were
There's something.
fashionable, or yeah, various kinds of little stories like that. But yeah, that also reminds me of one of the core principles of the Bates method of Dr. Bates's discovery, or usually when he would have patients come in and they would say, "Hey, I want to improve my vision," he would ask them, "Can you make your vision worse?" And it confused a lot of people because they're like, "Well, that's not why I'm here." But he was trying to get people to make that realization that you just shared and you had yourself, is that if I can make it worse, then I can also make it better potentially.
Well, nowadays, I know how we create what needs to happen in the brain to create to create glaucoma and cataracts and vicious humor detachments and myopia and presbyopia. So um, there are functions behind there, and that's where I would like to come today. There's functions behind there, um, which are uh, which is in the way to have the vision of, let's say, not to interfere in our vision. Yes, and that which brings me later on to the Eyebody pinhole glasses. But let me share a little bit more. You mentioned the Alexander work, the Alexander technique, which lots of listeners or viewers are maybe not familiar with. When I was in uh, after my experience, and it didn't take very long, I had a near-death experience in South America where I was traveling through. And during this time, I was drowning, but seemed to be not that drowning that I did not come back. During this time of the near-death experience, I had a connection with my own soul. And um, it doesn't mean for every vision improvement we have to have a near-death experience. That's not necessary. It was just in my case. And I made a contact with my own soul, and it was really a clear communication between my soul and me. Peter, it's not the time yet to go to leave. Please go back into your body here. You have got really still a time, like a work to do on this planet here. It was very, very clear.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's good not to resist one's own soul. And nowadays, I know I was so close to it. I had such a terrible childhood and short-sighted and stuttering and all of those things. My brain didn't work very well. Why not leaving now? I had enough. But I came back. It took me about a month in order to connect again with my body.
Hmm.
But this gave me an extraordinary up that I wanted to travel more, because on traveling, I thought there's something happening, a little bit of dying in between. I wanted to travel a little bit, which brought me to India. And I met up with the Dalai Lama back then, with the Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I remember he looked into my eyes, I looked into his eyes, and it felt like aeons of time passed there.
Hmm.
Probably took 10 seconds, 20 seconds, something like that. But it's a very deep imprinted memory there for me. And it didn't take very long. I became very sick. I had one of those traveling hepatitis. And when I was recuring myself in India, in Sri Lanka at that time, I was hopping onto the next bus. And from one moment to the next, I could see totally and utterly different in a way I could never see before. Suddenly, um, colors were so vivid. The quality of colors were absolutely vivid. Suddenly, I was able to see depth perception beneath the surface of things. But I think the coolest thing was, from one moment to the next, there were no more fears or anxiety. From one moment, and who has got no fears and anxieties? Just like for me, just beforehand, somebody just needed to come to me. Hi, Peter. Fears and anxiety. No more fears and anxiety. And it was an extraordinary time of presence and of consciousness, got consciousness from back here, all the way through my visual system here to my third eye. And wherever I went to bed in the evening, I woke up next morning, it was absolutely there. And so I traveled through India with a very different consciousness. My perception, my seeing was totally different. I was still stuttering. I still had my minus 10.5 diopter short-sightedness, which is I couldn't see without glasses more than about 10 centimeters, or yes, in 10 centimeters, 3 inches or something like this, in front of my eyes. But something in my brain had really changed. And then I traveled on direction to Australia and New Zealand. And after 7 months, I was meditating on a little mountaintop, something like this. As one does, one closes one's eyelids, one opens, and bang, from one moment to the next, this vision had gone. And that was, as you can imagine, not a good time. Having experienced how living and seeing out of consciousness for 7 months can be there, and suddenly it's gone. Fear and anxiety galore rose. No more colors, no more depth. Absolutely. I call it in my limbic brain and my emotion brain. Well, that was not a good time. And this brought me then to Australia and New Zealand. That's almost 40 years ago, where I settled here in New Zealand. And this brought me to the Alexander technique. Suddenly, I wanted to learn. I was so eager to rediscover what I had in India, and suddenly it was gone. I had no practices. I had nothing. It was given to me without knowing how I got there. Yes. And this brought me, I was reading a book by Alexander, The Use of the Self, where he helped somebody with his stuttering. And then I thought, if I can't have the thing which I had in India, maybe at least I can do something with my stuttering. And this brought me back to Australia. And I enrolled in a 3-year Alexander Teacher Training Program. If I do something, then I do it. And there I learned how the head-neck-back relationship can reorganize. Very often nowadays, the Alexander technique is known for helping to improve back aches, helping with the walking, applying it to the golf swing, playing tennis better, creating more efficiency within head, neck, back. And this helped me after a few weeks, to gradually let go of my stuttering, which was a habit since I started speaking. And so I learned principles there. And by the way, the speech started to change, but only when I came later to work with the visual system, with the eyes and the brain. Fundamentally, the speech was starting to change. And if I want to stutter, I can still stutter if I go into an appropriate part of the brain, where, by the way, the blur is happening too. Because it's not the eyes which see blurry. The eyes is just an organ of perception. The blur happens to be all the way in a certain part of the brain. And if I overfocus on this part of the brain, there's blur. And maybe I come to it, how we create the blur. Maybe. Yes, I will. Please remind me. So there I learned how to use my head-neck-back relationship more, and I was more poised, because in order to stutter really well, everything in one's tummy needs to be really debauched. Everything needs to really tighten. Otherwise, stuttering doesn't work very well. I can teach how to stutter. That's another. How to undo this again. It's just the same thing with the eyes. It's not very much different. So And then after a 3-year teacher's training program and after another um, um, uh, apprenticeship there, after 6 years, suddenly I asked myself, just a moment. I wanted to get a new pair of glasses. Oh, I wanted to get a new pair of contact lenses. I never had contacts before I went back to New Zealand, because in New Zealand, contacts at that time were so much more expensive. So I said, I go now to an optometrist and get a pair of contact lenses. Nobody knows that I can't see. Very helpful.
Yeah.
So when they were saying, no problem, next week you can have your contact lenses, I went back home and suddenly I questioned myself, just a moment, Peter, what do you really want? Do you want to have another pair of crutches so small nobody can see them? Or would you like to do this naturally? Guess what I opted for in order for us to talk here today?
No contacts.
Yeah, the natural thing. And then I really asked myself, just a moment, if I can change my speech and my body posture, why not my eyes? I had no idea what was actually behind the eyes. And then I made a commitment to myself. Yes, I like to do this naturally without having any idea how. And it helped me greatly, my experience when I was 18, 19 or 18 with my army. If I can make my eyesight worse, why not improve it? And this brought me then on the same day I asked some of my friends, and I didn't know really how to question this, how to ask this question. Can somebody help me with my seeing?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea about the Bates technique, nothing whatsoever. Is there somebody who can help me for me to see? And it was such a foreign idea, even because I had my glasses from the age of 3. And
Right.
most likely I was born directly with a dysfunctional visual system.
Mm-hmm.
Which
How amazing, though, that even without knowing that a particular path exists, just knowing that something can be done, and like, I want to do this naturally. I can do this naturally. I don't know how, I don't know what, but I know. And that's such an interesting thing that I've heard multiple people express, that even before they learned about Bates or any particular paths down this, there's just that kind of gut feeling that there's got to be something that can be done.
Very often we are internally guided there, that it comes to our consciousness there. Suddenly
Yeah.
it comes to our awareness. Hey, that's something I never thought even before.
Right. Yeah.
And so I asked some of my friends, and one said, well, there's this there's this lady from California, Dr. Janet Goodrich. She is just in town. It was in Sydney at that time, in Australia. How about you go there? So I had no idea about her. It was like, there was a Wednesday or so. Then on the weekend, I went there, and Janet asked us directly. She was a Bates teacher. She was a Reichian therapist from William Reich. So she worked very much on the emotional level, and she worked with patterning of the eyes, of the visual system. And she was a Bates teacher. And so I arrived there, and Janet asked us directly to take your glasses off. And when I followed her, I took my glasses off, and I couldn't see more than about 10 centimeters, 3 inches in front of my eyes. Total blur, absolutely blur galore. And then I put my glasses on, I could see, took them off, total blur. And then I thought, my God, there must be somewhere the blur. I put glasses on, I can see clearly, glasses of total blur. And I want to become a researcher of discovering where the blur is. How do we create blur in the first place? Nowadays, I figured it out. How we create the blur, and how I respond to the blur inside. And that's where I come in a moment to the pinhole glasses. And so that then I discovered where the blur is and how to undo the blur inside the brain. Again, it's not the eyes which are processing the information, it's the brain. And it's really, to me, it's brain work out of which the visual system grew out. So the eyes grew out directly, the origin in the first 3 weeks after conception. The visual system is already embodied there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it took with practices. It took about 1.5 years until I didn't need any glasses anymore. And I needed 2 prescription in between to lower the prescription. And that's now over 30 odd years ago. And I've got no presbyopia or cataracts or anything.
Wow. And you said that was from like around -10 starting point?
-10.5. Yes.
Wow.
So I was technically blind as a child, I was being told. But blindness does not mean one can't improve on things. It's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you put that in terms of how the eyes literally, grow out of the brain, and people might be familiar that the eyes are made up of brain tissue and they're, extensions of the brain protruding out of the skull. But I like the chronology that you reminded us about, the brain coming first and then the eyes protruding out from there. So when it comes to actually rewiring the visual system, I think, going straight to the source is very smart instead of getting a little hung up on just the eye organs.
So working only with the eye organs, to me, that doesn't take it deeper. So for me, I like to start with the origin. I like to start with the brain itself. Oh, by the way, then it took me a few years longer, and I discovered from the eyes. Oh, yes, the first experience I had after I didn't need glasses anymore, and that was a absolutely fundamental insight for me. The Bates method was, on one hand, working with eyes, the Alexander technique very much with the neck-back relationship. And they were not coming in any way together. They were 2 things. And one day in my teaching room, I had the experience of having envisaged seeing my cornea as I do here. And I was, for some reason, thinking of narrowing and tightening my cornea as I do now. And I noticed that my chest area was starting to slump. Well, for me as an Alexander teacher, it would have been easy to get out of the slump. I stayed with my slump. I came back to the vision, back to the corneas, sort of opening and widening my corneas. And I noticed that my whole shoulder region was starting to open up. And like a yo-yo, I could do this over and over again. Thinking about the cornea as I do now, I started to slump, and my physical body slumps right now. And when I thought about envisaging my cornea opening and widening, I noticed that my whole body posture was starting to elongate and widen out again. And later on, I was so fascinated. It was in the early 1990s. That's 30 years ago or longer. And then I thought, my God, with the short-sightedness, every anatomy book shows an eyeball which is narrowed and long, elongated.
Right.
So I must have one of those eyeballs too, or 2 of those. And then I thought of envisaging the retina inside the eyeball, and I thought of tightening them. And I noticed that my whole sacrum, as I practiced it, my whole sacrum was starting to narrow and tighten as well. Doesn't feel good. Don't practice this too much. Then I thought of opening and widening like the periphery, the night vision, the whole periphery of the retina. And I noticed that my whole lower back was starting to open up again without involving the body. The body was coming along as the vision was starting to open. And it was absolutely mind-boggling. And out of this, I researched this more, and I developed a whole map of the visual system in relationship, in my first book. I've got a print out there in um, in in relationship, the visual system to the physical body. So in nowadays, when people have got and they come to me for postural dysfunctions, I work with them directly with the visual system, and out of this, as a byproduct, the physiology of the body is opening and widening, pain-free at the same time. So combining the visual system with the physical body. And so these are one of my major discoveries for the vision improvement league or community, to discover minutely the different parts of the visual system and in relation to the physiology of the body, how they can combine together really specifically, not just hoping a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And
oh, wow.
And this brought me then through the visual system, and it didn't take very long, to the lower visual cortex, then to the upper region. And I just placed here my hand at the hair spiral. That's where I discovered where holistic overall coordination happens. And that was exactly what I had in India with my Indian experience, only the physiology wasn't embodied yet. The eyes, the physical body was not included. I had my third eye thing, but not the physiology of the eyes and the body. And I'm a guy, I like to have everything function. Because from the upper visual region of the upper visual cortex, there's a direct connection with the auric field and soul, and a direct connection to the interior of the brain, the optic nerves, the fluid and structures of the eyes, so that I can allow them to reorganize into our own blueprint. And then after a while of practice, the pattern of nearsightedness, presbyopia, glaucoma, cataract, they are really, really undoing. So that light waves can come naturally through the eyes to the maculas, to the lower visual cortex.
I'm glad you brought that back around, because I was going to ask, well, first of all, it's very illuminating for you to share how you kind of discovered the eye-body map and really feeling the connections and relationships between different parts of your own eyes and then other parts of your own body. And because I've like I said, when my Alexander Technique office mate shared your book with me, that was one of the things I was immediately drawn to, was this really cool map that I had never seen before. And so to hear how you came up with that is really awesome. And I was also going to ask you about your experience in India. So you kind of brought that back in of, you had that experience of clarity in India, then it went away, but then through Alexander Technique and your own discoveries and bait stuff, you got the vision back. And so I was kind of curious, like, if they felt similar, did it feel like a return to that type of vision you described in India? Did it feel like kind of a new type of clarity or a different type of vision now that you were bringing other parts of the brain into the mix?
Very good question. I don't know if I would have been able, during my 7 months of really consciousness, of having experienced what living out of consciousness is, and suddenly it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would be able to hold a normal job during this time. Yes, to do normal things, yes, in life, which we usually in our modern world are engaged with. Yes. So my vision has absolutely changed, so that I could become a father, and I've got grandchildren and a full life and house and a lawnmower, those things. Yes. So I think this vision has been in a much, much deeper way being enriched because the physiology, the physicality is really included. And I want to embody my soul through the visual system so that brain, eyes, and body, so that the eyes is an organ of the brain, it's an organ of perception, is the organ of soul and consciousness, to take it a little bit further into the spiritual realm. But very important to include the physical, the emotional, and the mental and the spiritual aspect together, integrating so that there's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual clarity on all levels. I had the spiritual clarity, but not the physical clarity, nor the emotional ones. Has fears and anxieties galore. But it gave me a pathway to learn to integrate all of those clarities together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the base of my work. Yes, beyond the eyes, but including the eyes. Very important.
Yeah, that's really special because, yeah, you mentioned like in India, you felt like maybe you had the third eye vision, you had that kind of spiritual vision and that type
Yeah.
of spiritual clarity. I think that's a really noble endeavor to really make sure it's all present, the spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and how they're all connected. And yeah, I think everybody listening can maybe think about their own sort of pizza pie ratio of checking in with each slice of the pie there for yourself, and really kind of gauging, and could be enlightening to kind of figure out what areas can be focused on, or just maybe brought back into the picture.
So either we come more from the lofty, the spiritual thing, then we need to earth ourselves, embody it, or we come from the sheer physical aspect and then to connect to heavens, to consciousness, and having both, having all of them together. I don't know, Nathan, do you know that I wrote a new book?
Yeah, I think that's with the soul qualities. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Because then what I discovered then, like I discovered the same thing as the physical, I discovered with the emotional and the spiritual thing too, connected to different parts of the eyes again.
Mhm.
So in nowadays, with fears and anxieties, I was able to pinpoint them out exactly in a specific part of the vitreous humor. So, and they are very often old cell memories that we come to those people who are dealing with their emotions and regurgling them over and over and over again without knowing how it happens. And so we find old cell memories not only in our body, brain, but as well in our eyes, in our hearing. In our hearing, I work lots with hearing these days, but as well with in the visual system. And when light waves are coming in, they are stimulating each time those old cell memories from the past, from childhood, from 7 generations, parents, grandparents, without having any idea. They are not really mine. Yes, the origin didn't really come from me, yet I'm still carrying them. And it's like this unknown territory of old cell memories housed in the visual system. And I like to undo them so that I can then bring soul qualities, for example, happiness and love and empathy and compassion into my visual system so that soul is being gradually more and more embodied in brain, eye, body, and the mind. So that's my latest. That's a continuum from the physical exploration between eyes and body. Now then, for the last 10, 15 years, I was exploring the emotional component between eyes, brain, and body,
Mm-hmm.
and then the spiritual qualities of soul qualities, so that we are embodying gradually that may be what we are here for, and in such a way fulfilling our own soul's purpose.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I love how you mentioned the role that the light and maybe specifically the sunlight plays, because I almost kind of got this vision of like a garden in my mind of knowing how sunlight, leads to growth of plants. And so if there's this old cell memory in a part of the eye where the light is coming in and kind of reactivating it or kind of growing this old cell memory, as opposed to like embodying this new soul quality in the eye, and then the sunlight comes in and activates that and then starts to grow that more and more. So it kind of brings a new dimension of the light or the sunning practice of, what are we actually growing here with the light.
Oh, exactly. And for me, there is a physical light coming in from the external, but there's then, I call it God or goddess conscious light waves coming from soul and consciousness through this upper visual cortex, through the visual pathway, and they're meeting inside the iris. So that the physical and the emotional ones, and the spiritual ones, they are meeting in the iris, and the iris, accordingly to Peter at least, is directly connected with the heart.
Mhm.
So, and we would like to have the light from behind and the light from the front, both together. Not that one is better than the other, but allowing them to really, really meet.
Mm.
Yeah. And this brings me actually to our theme for today, namely the pinhole glasses. And some of you have seen them, some not yet. And I'd like to explain how they work. And the visual system, how the brain works, is directly connected with the pinhole glasses. Let me speak briefly about the lower visual cortex, just above the neck area. That's where we tend to interfere in our own coordination. And I call it, with the focus, the mental focus. Very often we are confusing clear-sightedness with mental focus. By mental focus,
Mm.
I call it overfocusing. Can you imagine what overfocusing would be?
Yeah, over focusing makes me think about like trying really hard or like squinting or staring.
Yes, being online here and really trying to see something. Yeah,
Yeah,
Alexander would call it
forcing it.
end, going for one end there. Yes, like when I'm here in the room and my mind is already, I want to be at the staircase. Yes, and I have no idea how I get there because my mind is already there. That would be end game. And then I'm tripping over and like, oh, I didn't see that one.
Right.
And the other side of the coin, I call it underfocusing. Can you imagine the effect of underfocusing?
Yeah, under focusing makes me think of kind of spacing out or not really paying attention to what's going on around me. Maybe kind of like daydreaming or maybe getting a little lost in thought.
Exactly this one. Daydreaming, mind wandering, switching off. And how often during the day do I daydream, switch off, or I'm over focused? And both of those are coming from survival. Over focusing is absolutely fighting for it.
Mhm.
That's how we create really big wars, with over focusing. And with under focusing, I'm disassociating, I'm switching off. And the over focusing, I'm directly only outside. And with the underfocusing, I'm delving into my inner thing until depression is mine for life there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's a medium which is called presence, which I'm sure everybody has heard about. I'm not the first person who talks about presence, and which is, I think, of vital importance for our head-neck relationship, but as well for the visual process, and particular for our clear-sightedness. So that the synapses in the lower visual cortex can pick up the natural clear sight, not clear-sightedness, which I try to see really hard, and then I switch off.
Yeah.
And so I like to demonstrate just briefly the overfocusing and the underfocusing. If you are listeners at the moment rather than seeing I practice here, then maybe you can describe what's happening in my head neck back there. So I've got a picture there, and if I go over focusing, can you describe, Nathan, what's happening there?
Yeah, I noticed your chin seemed to kind of jut forward a little bit. Looks like a little contraction in the back of the neck. Yeah, a little bit of that slouching, like you said earlier. A little
Yes. So that's
tension
the
in
throat
the face.
area, my heart, my chest, everything, my organs are really pulling down.
Mm-hmm.
When I come back to the intent for presence in the higher region of the lower visual cortex, connected with the auric field and consciousness, how would you describe that?
More of a, there was a little bit of a lifting happening.
Yeah.
So sort of like seemed like some space was found in the upper body.
Right?
Um, and yeah, a lot more relaxation in your face.
Relaxation in my face, there's more poise there. And if I go now into under focusing, disconnecting from the picture, mind wandering, what can you notice there, Nathan, in my posture?
Little slump again, little more of that. Seemed like gravity kind of took over a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm totally disconnected. And it is one of those emotional spaces where I don't know. Under focusing does not reveal what's happening. And
Hmm.
I slump into my limbic brain. I put something like a lid on there. I don't feel there's no aliveness there and no pictures coming through. So here I need lively attentiveness, which takes me back into presence again. And once again, now from an eye and brain point of view, if I over focus here onto this outer picture, what can you imagine happens in my brainstem, in my thalamus, in my eyes when I do this, Nathan?
A little bit of like activation through kind of like, I guess the word that came up was like rigidity.
Rigidity? Yes, my brain, my thalamus pulls actually back and down so that the optic nerves are being pulled back. My eyes are staring, tightening the fluid and the structures inside my eyes, and I'm I'm stuck in my yeah, in my survival mode there, and my eyes can't function.
Hmm.
And when I come back to lively attentive to presence in the higher region of the visual cortex, I stop interfering what's happening in my brain, in my thalamus, in my eyes. It's not new orientation, yet it's stopping interfering in the first place. And if I go into under focusing, what I do now, I'm pulling my brain as well back and down, pulling the whole visual system back, and my eyes are not alive. They are dead. They are stagnant there. And then I can't, what's the word? I can't blame that I can't see because of how I was using my brain in the first place. So out of lively attentiveness there comes more poise and a non-interference, a non-interference in brain and eyes. That's to me, that's 50% in vision improvement. First, not interfering,
Yeah, right.
the non-interfering.
And that was not only really cool to see the demonstration of the effect on the posture, the body, the head, neck, um, but your description also of the outer picture, kind of like you said earlier, like, am I over focusing on the outside? Am I under focusing and kind of going more to the inner world? And it's when you came into presence, it just reminded me right of what you were talking about before, of the light meeting in the eye, where it's the light coming in from the outside, but also this inner light, and then the presence in the eye there as this kind of focal point, I guess. But it's such a delicate little tightrope there of like, am I, being overly pulled into the inner world? Am I being overly pulled into the outer world? Can I find that balance? And I imagine that everybody's got their own unique sort of percentage of how they're feeling into that.
Or maybe tricks, how
Mm,
we are overriding our own presence.
mm,
Then
mhm.
I like to come now to the pinhole glasses. You
Yeah.
probably wonder, when do Peter come to those? Because now they will make sense. Let me explain it. So when I put them on, um, they are little holes, tiny little holes within a plastic lens, so to speak. And the holes they are, I can blow through. They are open holes. And so the darkness helps, the blackness helps the periphery of the retinas to expand more. What I was saying beforehand about in my first experience where I noticed that my lower back was tightening, when my cell structures of the retinas were starting to slump, my whole lower back was tightening at the same time. So the periphery helps the whole information from 95% of the cell structures of the retina to open up so that the brain has got more information, and the physical body in the lower back will realign likewise. Now, during my vision teacher training with Janet Goodgett, she had a pair of Pinhole glasses. I
Mm.
used them, I sold them, something like this. Then she passed away and the Pinhole glasses disappeared. No, they are not anymore available. So here I thought, well, Pinhole glasses are a cool idea. I could see clearer through them. And then I ordered about, I don't know, from 15, 16, 17 different companies, Pinhole glasses. And I thought the coolest ones I take. When they arrived, there were cool frames and curved ones and you name it, all of those things. So I put the first ones on, and I noticed instantaneously I was going into overfocusing.
Mm.
And for me, because I'm quite subtle these days in brain, eye, and body, I noticed directly the overfocusing. So I took them off and I wondered, no idea. Then I put another one on and the same thing happened. And here I was into the present business. And I said,
Yeah.
there must be something which pulls my presence directly into overfocusing. I
Mm.
can see clearly, but there is something in my brain which is not appropriate. And then I discovered when the holes are too small, then the light waves are coming directly into the center of the macula,
Mhm.
and it leaves out the periphery of the macula, the fovea centralis in relationship to the entire macula. We talk about very little.
Mhm.
And and the macula, that's the groove in the center of the retinas where the light waves need to come to. And there were only two or three glasses where I noticed I went directly into underfocusing.
Hmm.
And then I discovered when the holes are too small, I go directly into overfocusing. And when they are too big, into underfocusing.
Mm.
Now, that was not a good time for me. Do you know why, Nathan?
were you kind of on a mission to maybe either try and find or create a size that actually brings you more into the or keeps you more in the presence state?
Exactly that one. And then it took 1.5 years of long discoveries to discover the coordinated maculas, not the dysfunctional maculas from every person something different, but the coordinated, the blueprint macula. And out of this, I discovered those holes. And in nowadays, those pinhole glasses, thousands of people use them, and I get each time the feedback, my God, I'm more poised, I'm more present, um, my physical body is more upright, something like this. My neck pain stopped. And I think it comes out for the appropriate hole sizes so that presence in such a way the macula is stimulated.
Hmm.
And this is, and people who wear them, yes, we can see clearer, but and out of presence clearer rather than interfering each time over and under focusing.
Right. Yeah. Which sounds a lot more sustainable and comfortable.
Sustainable, yes. And we can wear them for a long time, but there's a warning to it. I love warnings. And over-focusing hates those pinhole glasses. It's like, no, I don't want them. It's too much. I can't see. You name it.
Hmm.
Then I would, before over-focusing takes over, take them off and wait for 15 seconds and
Right.
then put them on. It's, to me, it's a practice tool for presence
Hmm.
and for the periphery, like the night vision, the palming,
Hmm.
Bates's palming, for widening, for integrating the periphery of the retina. And the presence with the whole size, this allows that the maculas, that the cell structure of the maculas can start to become more responsive, more alive, and really responsive.
Do you think that's something about kind of stimulating that part of the retina with the light in this new way is kind of helping develop that or help build maybe the eye's ability to do that eventually without the pinhole glasses?
Absolutely. I don't want to become dependent on eyebody pinhole glasses. Yes,
Mhm.
I like to use my own system, but it the light waves, they need guidance where to come to.
Right.
And they need guidance. And when we are presbyopic or myopic, many different functions, the physical eye has been reshaped in such a way
Correct.
that that the fluidity, that the light waves are not coming there where they should come. And
Mhm.
that's really using them. It helps me to allow that the light waves have got an orientation where they need to come to.
Mhm.
When we are normal prescription glasses, how they work, from my understanding, the lenses are cut in such a way, or with contact lenses, that the maximum light comes to the macula. It's almost like the macula will be bombarded with light waves. We need
Yeah.
just a tiny few light waves. That's plenty to stimulate the cell structures in the macula. So it's almost like with glasses, when they are not reduced, we are getting the maximum light waves. And then the reaction, because there's no safety and trust there, the reaction of over and under focusing is it it comes in and there's no presence. And so then the lower visual cortex is being switched on, is receiving the information for the clear-sightedness, but the whole rest of the eye, the retina, the fluid and the structures and the coordination from the upper region is not being included. That's how I think how our vision quite often can get worse and worse by wearing glasses. Yes, I can see clearly, but the inner aspect of the visual system over a period of time will gradually fatigue more and more, and then the cataract and the glaucoma and you name it. It can
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a key takeaway, not only in what you just mentioned with the role of the glasses, but also just how you said earlier in overfocusing. You can potentially have clear sight when you're in that overfocusing state. And that reminds me of when I used to like squint really hard and try to force my eyesight, and I could see better, but it was very fatiguing and tiring and would immediately lead to the worsening of my vision right afterwards. Um, so yeah, it's like so much of the glasses is just all about just that one aspect, the visual acuity, and then you're helping other people realize the other aspects of their visual system and the deeper aspects that we need to take into account as well. Do you feel like prescription glasses, whether they're plus lenses or minus lenses or progressives or multifocals, do you feel like they push people more towards overfocusing or underfocusing, or does it kind of depend?
I think on one hand, it can keep our overfocusing absolutely alive.
Hmm.
But then after a while, like overfocusing can happen for a certain period of time. And then I'm so exhausted, then I go into under.
Oh, I see. Yeah, kind of
Yeah. So
flip-flopping
it
back and
swings
forth.
back and forth. But
Yeah.
of course, with glasses without noticing it, because I can see clearly everything is hunky-dory. But one can see it when I drive from A to B. Yes, with my automatic car, I've been to B many friends' place many times before, and we can just go into under focusing, and
Yeah.
I arrive there, but I've got no idea how I arrived there.
Yeah.
That would be under focusing. We can do this with glasses really well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think presence in terms of driving is very important.
Yeah.
Presence in relationship is very important. Presence in reading is very important. And for all other computing and for all other times in our day as well. And so
Absolutely.
that's where, as a training tool, for me, it's a training tool.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, being able to see clearer and very good for reading,
Mhm.
very good for computer work, even if it looks a little weird.
Yeah, quick little story about that. I got a pair of pinhole glasses. They weren't your style. They were just one of those cheap ones I found online that I probably wasn't aware they were probably bringing me into that overfocus state. Because my intention with them, I learned about the Bates method when I was still in university, and so I still had to graduate. But I was like so
Very important to
anti-glasses.
overfocus there in order to get it.
Exactly, right? So
Or
it's
it
like
could be important.
so
Doesn't need to
I showed up to a class one day with my pinhole glasses, and the professor was there showing stuff in the front of the classroom, and he just like turned right to me and was like, "Why are you wearing sunglasses?" Because he didn't know what they were. And it was so counterintuitive because it immediately switched from me feeling kind of like excited and like, ooh, I can like see the PowerPoint without my prescription glasses and I can follow along and take notes. But then it immediately just turned to this kind of like social pressure of like everybody looking at me and wondering like, what's that weird guy doing, you know? And so I just kind of like put them away and never really used them in class again, just for fear out of being kind of called out or looking strange, which is kind of a shame because I wish I would have just kind of gone with it. But at the same time, it was a good learning lesson as well to kind of see, um, despite the vision tool, there can also be this powerful like social or kind of customary effect.
So I would recommend don't wear this. I'm living here in the Commonwealth. If you meet in the past the Queen, these days the King, don't wear them. It's not necessary. Yes, but but at other times, feel free them use them for watching television movies, brilliant for movies, but as well for reading, rather than using prescription glasses for reading. And practicing, I use them very much with flying. I travel about 7, 8 months a year around the globe and doing retreats, supporting people. And during flying, I use them because I like to arrive with presence wherever I go to, so that I know in the afternoon of arriving, even from New Zealand to Britain, past the US, I know I can really meet a group without having any jet lag. So the presence is very important, that the thalamus and the hypothalamus can fly with me in order where I'm going to. So for me, flying is always an attentiveness to presence, drinking water, having noise canceling headphones so that I can be present with the visual system. And then I can arrive at the other end and there's no jet lag whatsoever. And I can trust the system. These days, I really trust it.
Wow.
And I would be using them not for the whole trip. One gets
right. Yeah.
Very clear. But each time, again, a little bit, or when I watch a movie or so, then as a practice tool for presence, yes, I would be using them. Yeah.
Yeah, that might sound kind of familiar to how I incorporated them into my process, where I would really only leave them on for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And really, I would describe it as I would wear them until I received a signal. And pretty much it was kind of a signal. It was very similar to when I would wear an eye patch to cover up one eye. And I was kind of curious. I was like, what's the best amount of time for me to wear this eye patch? And usually the answer was my eye will let me know. So like I would wear the patch for a certain amount of time, and then all of a sudden that eye that's under the patch would send me a signal. Sometimes it would be a visual signal where I would start to see some like visual snow in that eye, and it was kind of like, hey, I want to come back out. So it's kind of similar with the pinholes, where I would just feel this sense of completion, and who knows, maybe it was me, kind of coming to that place of presence and then feeling some sort of internal shift that happened. It was like, okay, I think they've done what they need to do, and I take them off, and then I'm just seeing in this new way.
What they're helping as well, you were just mentioning the patch, is very often both the duality, both visual systems may not function equally there. Yes, one can be stronger, the other one weaker, and depends on the brain, it can swap from moment to moment. So
you mean like left eye, right eye?
Yes, and in the lower visual cortex. So we would like to go from the duality to oneness, but that's a different podcast again. So those eyebody pinhole glasses, they are helping me to understand, to notice when I've got the tendency to underfocus on one side or overfocus, so that I can bring more attentiveness to it. The patch, if there's a weaker eye, very often it's based on a chronic underfocusing. And I would like to come to lively attentiveness that both can equally be there together out of presence. And I would be using them when I noticed in my visual system one flakes a little bit. I would be using them, and it doesn't take very long. It's back into presence again. And so that both can function simultaneously together. Cool. And when I look these days through them from my upper visual cortex, I hardly see any holes.
Right.
Because if I go with overfocusing or underfocusing, with overfocusing, there are holes galore. So when I come to presence, both sides together, the essences will be transforming to here, and seeing through the visual system from up here, the holes will disappear. So it becomes a real clear open space.
Interesting. So it's almost like how the brain is so used to kind of tuning things out, like our blind spots or the blood vessels in the retina. and then maybe you get to that point of relaxation where the brain like tunes out the black plastic and you just see through it.
Yeah. Out of presence and from envisaging from here, then the visual system is really involved and the holes they are disappearing. Whereas if I come from overfocusing, oh my God, so many holes, I don't like them. But out of presence, which they are promoting from here, it's a vision tool to connect to our coordinating mechanism through the visual pathway. We will be seeing the interior of the visual system in relationship to the external world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this tool is really about, the Eyebody Pinhole.
Yeah, and
Great tool to use.
yeah,
And
I mean it's so supportive, and I mean I still get so happy and so excited when I'm in a session with a student and maybe it's like early on and we're just starting to go through a consultation or a first lesson, and especially if it's somebody who you can tell that they're just really either frustrated or impatient or just feeling kind of tired of the blur, and like having them look through a little pinhole they make with their hand, or they might even have a pair of pinhole glasses or something, and for them to look through that and have that type of clarity and that new type of seeing through a non-prescription means, and that how it just what have you said today a couple times, the light alertness,
yeah,
it
the presence so that light can come in.
yeah, it's like in that poise, it's like they sit up more, like, and they
Exactly.
get this sense of excitement, um and I guess in that moment, whether they're aware of it or not, there might also be a big reduction of fear and anxiety. Um, and so I'm just really glad that you brought that in right from the very start of our conversation today, the relationship that has on all of this. Um, and I was appreciative that my vision teacher, Jerry Ann Tabor, also made that a big part of her working with me of, we're not just going to go through and learn these Bates things together. We're going to identify what kind of fear is existing in your vision, and how we can address that side of it too. So yeah, what an amazing and simple, so to speak, tool. I don't want to, I know you put a lot of time and research into developing a very specific type of pinhole glasses. So I want to highlight that today, because like you and I both mentioned today, it is easy to find little, $1 or $2 pairs online, but they really might not be the best thing for you. So to know that you've put the time and the energy into, like you said, I think it was before we started the recording of, or maybe went during our conversation of just uh, pinhole glasses that are developed by a vision educator is a very unique thing, because I think most of the manufacturers of pinhole glasses are maybe not necessarily as well versed or familiar with all of these nuances. So
Nuances, what the holes are really, in what way they are affecting. Yes, we can see clearer, cool, with overfocusing it's possible. What's the subtlety of the brain and the visual system
mhm.
that's really doing. And I think that's where developed by a vision educator who can explain what's happening and could demonstrate what's happening is very different.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
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 So that's the tool of the Eyebody pinhole glasses. And they want to be used, they want to be applied, something like that.
Yeah.
And they're available on our Eyebody website.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, if people want
Yes,
to try them out, how can they learn
yes.
more?
It's called www.eyebody, like eye and body.com. Yeah. And they are coming in red and in gray, and they are being shipped with description how to use them as well. That's online. And it's they have got metal, what is called metal things on the side, so one can bend them. The main thing is that they are straight and with the holes, but one can bend them accordingly to what one needs. And one can do this over a flame or going to an optometrist. But for many, many skulls, they work really, really well. Yes.
Nice. Yeah, and that's where they can find the pinholes and also learn more about your Eyebody map and approach in general. And I'm sure that's where they'll find maybe dates or information about your upcoming events and things like that.
There are British or English events, English speaking events at the moment in Europe, in northern Italy, and in the UK for 6-day retreats. I do most of my work, hands-on work, during retreats, but as well online. People can get me as well there.
Cool. That's amazing. And I started off our chat today with a little story about my office person I shared the office with showing me your book, and maybe we can wrap up today with a little story just about how the very first time I was introduced to the Bates method back in 2010 was because I saw somebody wearing a pair of pinhole glasses, and I had never seen anything like that before. And so I just, it looked kind of like that. And so I was just curious and just started asking about them. And he proceeded to tell me about natural vision improvement. He had just come from India, where he was at the School of Perfect Eyesight and was, working on getting rid of his glasses. And that just lit a fire under me to just start learning so much more. And so I always kind of have a little extra gratitude for pinhole glasses in general, because without pinhole glasses, I may not have learned about the Bates method. So.
Okay, cool. Well, it's wonderful to hear this. Yeah, wonderful to hear this. And people, when they're wear, they will see directly clearer.
Yeah.
This is because some of the light rays are coming directly to the macula to stimulate the clear-sightedness. Yet, it's visual re-education is still important here. So I really like to mention it's a tool for presence, which allows the light waves to come in to see clearly. But the re-educational process is still very, very important. But this will be supplementing the educational process. But the education process is the more important one, and they can work then as well. And of course, for people who have got no interest of re-education, they can use them as well. And maybe they come later on in their life.
Yeah, right. Well, that's awesome that you put the instructions in there for the education piece. And I totally agree with you. It's amazing that these things exist, that people can have that instant effect and really prove to themselves of, oh, maybe there's not something fundamentally wrong with my eyes or my vision, and maybe there's some other thing I can explore here. But then to take that next step and really realize, oh, I can also achieve this on my own and really start to embody this. But yeah, to have that tool to act as the stepping stone and to kind of bridge that gap for people, I think is very helpful. So really glad you're out there sharing this with people, and hopefully people have either a great introduction to pinhole glasses today or a much deeper take on it and a new angle to maybe revisit it. And maybe some people will be reaching out to ask more, or maybe even attend some of your things coming up. So yeah, definitely go to Peter's website, check out all the cool stuff he's got going on.
Good. Thank you very much, Nathan. Wonderful to be again in contact, and I wish you all the best for your re-education program, which you have got to offer there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure being with you, Peter. Wonderful speaking with you today.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.